He was preparing to go to war against Abdullah ibn Zubair after Medina had come out on his side. And he did very many horrible things. But what happened to him is the bile in his stomach boiled up and he died of a horrible illness. Yazid ibn Muawiyah died 70 days or more after that. And he died in a state of junub and in a very ill state. A state of junub means that liquids have come out such where it necessitated ghusl. And the things that necessitate ghusl when they come out are massive, either massive blood loss, wet dream, ejaculation, or massive amounts of feces or urine coming out of parts of the body besides the anus or the private parts. So that's the ultimate end that occurred with Yazid. This occurred on the 15th of Rabi' al-Awwal, and he was at Homs. He was 38 years of age. His son, Muawiyah ibn Yazid, prayed on him, while some say it was Khalid. But most believe it was Yazid. It was Muawiyah ibn Yazid. After that, people came forward and they gave Muawiyah ibn Yazid the oath of allegiance. People came forward and gave Muawiyah ibn Yazid the oath of allegiance and said that no one's going to refuse you allegiance. The only people that would have done so would have been Al-Hussein, Abdullah ibn Umar, ibn Zubair, and Abdul Rahman ibn Abi Bakr. But that matter was completed because, as we've just learned, Hussein ibn Ali, he was martyred. Now it was during this time that Muawiyah stayed in control for a number of months or less. And although he was Yazid's son, he was better than Yazid. He died at 21 years of age. He did not want to be the Khalifa and stated so, but was put in the position. And it specifically stated that he believed Ibn Zubair was the better option. During this time, the battles still raged between those who were in Mecca and Medina, and also those who were in Mecca and Medina who had given bay'ah to Abdullah ibn Zubair, because he had been given bay'ah by Mecca, Medina, the Hijaz, then Iraq, then Yemen, until most of the Ummah had given him bay'ah. Most of the Ummah had given him bay'ah. And then all of a sudden Damascus was conquered by Ad-Dahhak al-Fihri. Some are unsure whether he was a companion or not, but he was deeply opposed to Umayyah rule. He had word sent to Abdullah ibn Zubair, but then decided to leave it, and then declared himself the ruler of that area. Marwan ibn al-Hakam from the Bani Umayyah had to be called back to fix the situation. And Marwan decided that he was going to take rule and would not release the rule after that. When Ad-Dahhak was killed, he was also killed along with 3,000 of the companions resisting Marwan ibn al-Hakam and the Bani Umayyah. I'll say that again, he was killed with 3,000 of the companions resisting that rule. Then Marwan ibn al-Hakam took leadership, or attempted to take leadership over that area. At this same time, the Amir of Hims in Sham was An-Nu'man ibn Bashir, who was a famous companion. He tried to help Ad-Dahhak, and the supporters of Marwan ibn al-Hakam killed him as well. During this same year, The number of people that died were many. There was Al-Walid ibn Utbah, and he had thought about the Khilafah after Yazid, but instead was giving control over Medina in place of that. Rabi'a al-Jurashi, who was the faqih, he also died in that time. And then during this same year, Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu, he, as being called Amirul Mu'mineen, because his actual title is Amirul Mu'mineen, because he was chosen by the ulama and the ummah. He is Amirul Mu'mineen. Amirul Mu'mineen Abdullah ibn Zubair began the process of demolishing the Kaaba's walls and building them up on the foundations of Ibrahim, based upon what he discussed with his auntie Aisha as-Siddiqa radiallahu anha. Now, there's something very important. Why? Well, you have to look at Abdullah ibn Zubayr for a moment. Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu, he was the first child of the Muhajirun, the immigrants born in Medina. He's the first of them. Outstanding scholar. Wonderful scholar, outstanding. Known for his mastery of Qur'an and mastery of Sunnah. Further to that, he had understood the hadith when Aisha was with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ one day sitting. Because Aisha is his khala. Why? Who's his mother? His mother is Asma bint Abi Bakr. And Asma bint Abi Bakr is her older sister and the wife of Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiallahu anhu. This is the same Asma bint Abi Bakr who was called the keeper of the two belts, who split her belts in half to give one for them to have the zamam or the reins for the camel and one to tie her jubbah in place. This is the same Asma bint Abi Bakr who used to carry water from the well on her head. And one day the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ rode past and saw her struggling and said, "Should I give you a ride?" And she said no. And when she arrived back, she mentioned this to Az-Zubayr, and she said, "I didn't do it because I remembered your jealousy." And he said, "There was no jealousy to remember. It would have been better for you and less harmful for you to have accepted the ride." It's from this point that the fuqaha have a difference between the Hanbalis on one side and a lot of the scholars on the other side regarding public transport. Regarding public transport and taking rides. In places like Sham and other places, some of the Shafi'is have said it's haram for women to ride the bus and for women to ride in taxi cabs because of the possibility of khalwa. This understanding is one, but the Hanbalis have the understanding based upon this hadith that public transport, as long as the person's visible and they're not alone and in danger, is perfectly valid. There's no harm with that. And that's so from that statement of Asma bint Abi Bakr and what happened between her and the Prophet ﷺ, we learn at least one position that is valid to ride on public transportation, because there's a big dispute about it, a massive dispute. And there are some sisters in the Muslim heartlands that will not ride the bus, that will not take cabs. And that's fine, as long as people at least understand and respect the other position. Now, Aisha as-Siddiq radiallahu anha, his khala, was with the Prophet ﷺ one day, and he said to her, he said, "Aisha, your people are still fresh from their jahiliyyah. And had this not been the case, I would have demolished the walls of the Kaaba all the way down to the foundations of Ibrahim and rebuilt it back up." All right. Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu, he spoke with his khala about this, and he decided to do it. And he began the process. The unfortunate thing about it, and the fortunate thing about it, was it was in the middle of his resisting the tyrannical rule of some of the Umayyah. Because the Umayyah, in a way, helped him because they used catapults with fire against him, and they hit and burnt the curtains of the Kaaba, and burned the Kaaba, and damaged the Masjid al-Haram, and devastated the walls of Masjid al-Haram. That was wicked, it was blasphemous, but from another standpoint, it was less work for him because the walls of the Kaaba were knocked down. But then he had to run inside of the Kaaba because the shelling was so great, people could not come outside to do tawaf and pray Salatul Jama'ah. They could not pray in the Jama'ah, in the 5-time Fard Salah. In Masjid al-Haram, they couldn't pray because it was raining down fire from the sky, from the catapults surrounding the masjid. So Abdullah ibn Zubair, radiallahu anhu, he began the process of rebuilding the masjid, and particularly rebuilding the Kaaba. When year 65 came, with all of this going on, Marwan ibn al-Hakam went to Egypt and took control of it as property. And he put in charge of it his son Abdul Aziz. And he strengthened his power base. Then he returned to Damascus, and he died in Ramadan. He died in Ramadan. After that, power was given to his son, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan is called by some of the ulama Abul Muluk, the father of kings. Because after that, almost all of the governance of Bani Umayyah came through him. His sons, or someone to do with him and his sons. All of the power went through him. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan was described as a hefty man and very strong. He's famously said about people who resisted his rule, he said, "Anyone who differs with my rule, be sure to make my sword agree with his head." He was very well known for his refusal to accept people who differed with his rule. Now, I want you to remember, in spite of all of that, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan is the man that built up and purified and laid the foundations of Masjid al-Haram and the Dome of the Rock. He's the man that did this. He had over 100,000 dirhams taken out of the Muslim treasury. 1 dirham is 17 pounds now, based upon the current economic climate. Multiply 17 by 100,000. That will tell you how much he spent on that complex back then to build up that place. He wanted to give the workers there, the 2 main engineers, a reward for their work, and they refused to take it. They said, "We still have more than 10,000 dirhams left." Abdul Malik ibn Marwan ordered that the dirham should be melted down and made and put into the dome. So he had them smelted and put into the dome. And his reasoning is that all things that have to do with the glorification of Allah should be lofty and noble and mighty. And so the Christians and Jews could not look at the Dome of the Rock because the glare of the sun was so great it used to blind them. And he said no kafir should be able to have any advantage over a Muslim. And so they couldn't even look. That was part of what he believed. Surah At-Tawbah, the 9th Surah, Ayah 29, that you should take the jizya from them, وَهُمْ صَاغِرُونَ, and they're small. He considered them being blinded by the Dome of the Rock as part of that ayah, that they have to be made low because their religion is low, and they have to be shown that they are nothing. He considered that as part of his process. Now that dome is still smelted with that same gold, but they've covered it with gold thatching, the plastic and ceramic thatching. The reason why they did that is in the latter Ottoman years before Israeli expansion into that area, it was still quite blinding. And even though it's covered with the plastic thatching, even when you look at pictures of it on television or on posters, it still has that luster, that glare. So you can imagine what it must be like if you take the plastic off of it and the siding and the aluminum siding off it. How blinding it must be, or must have been, for the Christian on the way to church on Sunday, and he couldn't see through the walkway of Via Dolorosa. But that was Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan had the area built up, and he made sure that in the future no one would be able to look askance at the Muslims and consider themselves better than the Muslims. This was the same year that Sulaiman ibn Surad al-Khuza'i, the great companion,